to talk more about the future of zero emissions, we have Energy Transition and Environmental Defense Fund Senior Vice President Mark Brownstein. Hi, Mr. Brownstein. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
All right, first of all, we understand that leaders across the world have vowed to reach net zero emission targets by certain dates, right? And they set what people call ambitious target. For example, India, they set the target in 2070, UK by 2050. And of course, in order to achieve those targets, they have to switch to a renewable energy, right? Now, how would you perceive the global process in harnessing these sources?
Well, you're exactly right. In order for us to avoid the worst consequences of climate change, we need to make a fundamental transition away from the energy choices that we've been using for the last 150 years. We need to fundamentally reduce our dependence on coal, gas, and oil. And what that really means is that we have to do two basic things. One is we have to ramp up the deployment of renewable energy for generation of electricity, and then use that green electricity to do more work for us, powering our transportation and our buildings. And then the second thing that we need to do is we need to find new low and zero carbon molecules to do the work that green electricity can't do by itself, say powering our airplanes or our global ships or some of our heavy industry. So we need to do both of those things, and this conference is very much focused on those twin challenges.
Right, and what are actually the common challenges that countries face when they're trying to transition to a renewable energy on a large scale?
Well, we can't lose sight of the fact that energy is essential to all of our lives. And many of us are privileged to live in parts of the world where energy has been abundant, and we enjoy a lot of material comforts as a consequence of that. We can't lose sight of the fact, however, that there are many parts of the world where energy remains a challenge. There's still close to 1 billion people on this planet that don't have access to electricity at all. And so while we work to decarbonize our global energy system, we also have to pay attention to making energy more available and more affordable for the people who have struggled to get access to energy to this point. It's not an easy challenge, but it's a necessary challenge for us to confront.
Can I please dig deeper into this renewable energy sources? Can we say that renewable energy is 100% clean? I mean, yes, it produces zero emission when generating electricity, but of course it produces emissions during the building of the infrastructures, right? Because it uses steel that produces lots of carbon dioxide when it's made, which of course contributes to global warming. And then also when we are about to build solar plants, it causes deforestation and will affect the wildlife around it because we have to clear the land to make place for those solar plants. So what are your thoughts on this?
Yes, well, even today's traditional power plants require a lot of steel, require a lot of cement, and require a big geographical footprint. So whether you're talking about traditional power plants or you're talking about renewable energy sources, they clearly are going to be trade-offs here. The bottom line, however, is that we need to really focus at this point in time on reducing the carbon footprint of the energy choices we make, because the carbon emissions in the atmosphere, whether you're talking about methane or you're talking about carbon dioxide, that those emissions into the atmosphere are accelerating a global climate change, which is imposing huge costs on our societies in the form of increased storms, in the form of drought, in the form of heat waves, right? Just about everywhere in the world is being affected now by climate change. So there's a huge tragedy in the making, imposing huge costs on our societies that we need to try to avoid. Renewable energy is probably one of the best ways to do that, but we do have to recognize that there are going to be trade-offs if we're going to address the climate crisis in a timely way.
Right. And we know that each countries have their own struggles, their own situation and capabilities. So what do you think is the best strategies that can be universally applied to accelerate the adoption of renewable energy worldwide?
Well, the Paris Agreement, which was signed in 2015, was all about collective action. It was a recognition that every country in the world had a role to play in addressing the climate crisis. But it was also a recognition that every country in the world was unique and that their contributions to addressing the climate crisis had to be tailored to their national circumstance. The commitments that each one of those countries made back in 2015 would have put us on a path to addressing climate change. What we're going to be finding at this COP is that most of these countries have failed to fully live up to the commitments that they made, and so that we are collectively as a planet off track. This conference is going to be, how do we get ourselves back on track? What do we need to do? The fact that it's being held in the United Arab Emirates, which is a large oil and gas producing country, means that there is going to be a particular focus on the oil and gas industry and what the oil and gas industry can do to help the world get back on track. Of course, the oil and gas industry is a major source of these greenhouse gas pollution worldwide, but it has a lot of the technological capabilities to be a constructive partner in making the transition. The question is willing.
Okay. Now, in the context of global climate goals, how crucial is renewable energy in reducing greenhouse gas emissions?
Renewable energy, incredibly important. Again, the pathway to decarbonizing our global economy is about ramping up the production of zero carbon electricity, and wind and solar are the cheapest ways to do that. So ramping up the deployment of that green electricity and then making maximum use of that green electricity to power our homes and our businesses and our cars and our trucks. And then alongside it, to find molecules that don't depend on fossil fuels that we can use in place of oil to power our ships and our planes and our heavy industry. That's really our twin challenge.
When we're talking about renewable energy, we're not just talking about the technological factors behind it, right? But also the natural factors that often becomes the, something that we should tackle, because we cannot make the wind blow and we cannot make the sun shine. Now, how do you think it should be tackled, these factors?
Yes. Well, so you raise an important point. At any given moment, you can't guarantee that the wind is going to blow in a certain location or that the sun is going to shine in a certain location. We all know that.
Yep.
And so alongside the deployment of the wind turbines and the solar panels, you need to have a well-developed electric grid that interconnects these technologies. What the data shows is that when you have grids that scale large geographies, you can average out the wind and the sun and help manage that variability just by spreading the geography over which you get the energy. So that's one strategy. And of course, the second strategy is the battery technology that we now use for our computers, our laptops, our iPhones, and so on, that's now finding its way into our cars, is rapidly developing to the point where battery technology can actually be used also to help manage that variability from wind and solar. And this is already being demonstrated in places like California, where there is an aggressive effort to use renewable energy to meet that state's energy demands. California is by itself the world's 5th largest economy. So it's a pretty good test bed of what could be a solution set for many of the nations around the world.
All right. Just out of curiosity, how sustainable is those solar panels? I mean, how long can they operate? How many years?
Well, you're right. I mean, everything at some point wears out. I think what we're finding is that solar panels can last for many years. The good news here is that the materials that go into manufacturing the solar panels, the materials that go into manufacturing the batteries that I was just talking about, can be reused. So yes, there is mining that is going to be required to get the amount of lithium that we need to make the amount of batteries that we need. And yes, we need to do mining for silicon, for copper that go into our solar panels. But the good news is that once these materials have been extracted out of the ground, they can be reused over and over and over again. And so alongside our production of these new technologies, we need to develop the capacity to recycle and reuse the materials that go into these facilities. And in doing that, we will end up with a cleaner and more sustainable industrial economy than the one we have today.
All right, Mr. Brownstein, thank you so much for sharing your insights. We certainly learned a lot. Thank you for being with us on the 3 Hour News Show on C Today. Have a great day.